Hey everyone, today I just wanted to discuss with you one of my first flying tips, and that is on what it takes to be a pilot. I have a lot of people ask me, what's involved, so I wanted to make this video just to make it very clear what's required to be a pilot. And I also wanted to share some quotes I thought were related to that. One comes from the Bible in Luke 14. It says, "Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, 'This person began to build and wasn't able to finish.'" So I don't want you to start off on your pilot journey not knowing what it costs to accomplish it. I mean, there's a lot of time that needs to be invested. And also there's a lot of cost involved with it, and so I want you to be fully aware of what's involved. And another good quote I thought comes from the man who invented the airplane, Wilbur Wright, one of the Wright brothers. He says, "The man who wishes to keep at the problem long enough to really learn anything positively must not take dangerous risks. Carelessness and overconfidence are usually more dangerous than deliberately accepted risks." So I just want you to know what you're getting into before you start, and also find out what's involved. I mean, this first video is on what it takes, and future videos will go into different aspects of flying. So the first aspect of learning what it takes to be a pilot is you need to know what are the minimum requirements. And anytime you need to know what the requirements are for anything related to aviation, you can look in what's called the Federal Aviation Regulations. And the one that dictates what it takes to be a pilot is found in 61.103. The first requirement is age. You have to be at least 17 years old to become a pilot. That doesn't mean you can't start earlier, but it means you can't actually obtain a license until you're 17. You have to be able to read, speak, and write English, which is pretty easy if you live in the United States. But if you come from another country, that's something that is a requirement. You'll have to brush up on your English before you can become a pilot. There's really two steps. There's one that's you have to take what's called a practical test, a written test, where you actually usually take it on a computer today. And to do that, you first have to receive training from an instructor. And you have to have a logbook endorsement saying you've completed adequate training to take that test. And what training is required is found in 61.105. It's called your aeronautical knowledge. Once you've passed that aeronautical knowledge test, you're then eligible after you do enough flight training, and the required flight training is found in 61.107. It's called the Flight Proficiency Requirements, and we'll actually go through those in detail. And you have to go through the required flight training and have an instructor sign off that he's perform that training with you and you've done it successfully. And once you get that endorsement in your logbook, you can actually take what's called the practical test. The practical test is you do this with a designated FAA examiner, and it usually takes 1 to 2 hours of really just discussing different aviation problems with him. He'll ask you to usually plan across country, and then he'll go through different scenarios with you and just make sure that you understand what's expected of you as a pilot. And then you'll go out and you'll do 1 or 2 hours of flying in an airplane where you'll demonstrate that you know how to fly that plane and you are the pilot in command. Just to give you an idea of what's required for your flight proficiency, you have to log a minimum of 40 hours of flight time. At least 20 of those hours has to be dual, which means you're with an instructor, and another 10 hours has to be solo, where you're by yourself. And you don't fly solo right away. Normally you have 10 to 15 hours of training with your instructor at least, and when he sees that you're proficient in the airplane, he'll then have you fly by yourself. Normally it's just around the airport to start with. You'll take off and land the airplane by yourself. Several times after he sees that you're good at that, he'll usually send you on a cross-country somewhere. And normally the first time he'll send you somewhere that you've been before, so you're familiar with it, and then later on he'll send you to an airport you've never been to before. And just to go over the minimum requirements of things you have to cover during your training, you have to do 3 hours of cross-country flying. Cross-country is where you have to go at least 50 nautical miles from where you started. So you have to fly to an airport 50 miles away and then fly 50 miles back at a minimum. Normally you go a little bit further than that just to make sure you meet the minimum. And then you also need to do 3 hours of night training. That night training has to involve cross-country flying, or once again, some of that 3 hours is where you fly to an airport 50 nautical miles away and back. You also have to do at least 10 landings at night, and which has to involve flight in a traffic pattern. And that's normal. Anytime you come in or out of an airport, you're flying in a traffic pattern, and basically it's just a rectangle shape around the airport, and there's a standard entry that you do, and then after you take off and exit. So we'll go through that in future lessons. You also have to do 3 hours of instrument flying, where you fly so instrument flying is where you're flying solely based on instruments. You're not looking outside the window, so you can't be looking to see where the ground's at or the horizon. You're actually using the instruments in the airplane. You can accomplish this by flying in the clouds, actually, or you can do this with what's called a view limiting device that actually blocks the sides, so you can only see down at the instrument panel and you can't see outside. And then your flight instructor's with you, making sure that you're not around any other planes or obstacles. And then another requirement is that you have to have 3 hours of prep for the practical test within past 2 months leading up to it. So getting ready for the test with the designated examiner, that you've done 3 hours of training with your instructor. And then you also have to have done 10 hours. So the 10 hours of solo flight that you're required to do, you have to do 5 hours of cross-country flying, and you have to do a cross-country flight that's greater than 150 nautical miles total distance. And you have to do 3 takeoffs and landings at an airport with an operational control tower. So flying into an operating control tower, that means that if you fly to smaller airports, there's no one telling you what to do. You just fly up to the airport and you just announce on the radio what you're doing. So if anyone else is in the area, they know what you're doing. So you might say, I used to train at Blue Ash before the airport closed. You would say, Blue Ash traffic, this is India Sierra Zulu. That's the name of your airplane. I'm 10 nautical miles away, inbound from the east. Any traffic, please advise. So you'd say that, and then once you got closer, you'd announce that you were entering the pattern. You'd announce as you turn to what's called base leg, which is a right angle to the runway, and then you'd say when you turn final so everyone knows you're going to land. Now a controlled tower is where you fly to an airport that usually has a minimum amount of traffic to make it worthwhile. You actually you call a tower and you're talking to somebody, and you just say, same thing, you would call and you would say, Lunken Tower, this is India Sierra Zulu, 25 nautical miles to the north, I'm inbound, and then they would come back to you and ask what your intentions are. So you're just talking to them as you come in. And before you do this by yourself, your instructor would do it with you, probably do at least 3 landings there, make sure you're comfortable, and then they'd send you by yourself, and you'd have to, call them, and you just tell them what you're doing, and they tell you which runway they want you to land on. When you land, they tell you where to taxi. So actually, it's not too difficult. It's just a little bit different environment. So that the FAA wants to make sure you've done that by yourself before you get your pilot's license, so you're not ill-prepared when you get ready to go. And a lot of people, they might say things about the FAA, but actually, as you, become a pilot, you'll learn that a lot of what they expect of you is reasonable. You don't want to be flying if without having done these things. So how much time is involved with this? It took me about a little less than a year to get my private pilot's license, but I had a busy work schedule, and I was doing it after work, and I had probably, a couple breaks of at least a month or 2. So that adds time to how long it takes, obviously. So, definitely I would do it within a year. You could actually probably do it within, 8 to 12 weeks if you were spending, all your spare time on it. But, for like the for the written test, that usually takes me, probably 2 to 4 weeks of preparation as you're studying, every night. And then for the practical test, that's all flying and talking to your instructor. So we kind of went through, it's a minimum of 40 hours of flight time. And then normally if you're not flying a lot like I was, it'll take you, 50 to 60 hours to get that done, because you forget some things, and when you come back, they got to retrain you. So, if you can keep it where you're flying, once a week, I think that helps get things done faster. What is the cost? A lot of people want to know. I just looked up for this area. I'm from the Cincinnati area. There's a school called Blue Sky Flight Training. They ran a 172 for $110 an hour, and the instructor's $30 an hour. So I estimated the cost to be between $5,200 and $7,200. Also, there's another airport near here called Red Stewart Aircraft Service, and they rent a Piper Cub, and that runs more on the order of $70 an hour. So that brings the cost down probably somewhere between $4,000 and $5,200. Obviously, there can be a wider range if you take longer to do it, or if you're struggling with something. But I would say that's a typical range. And I also wanted, a lot of people ask, so why should I fly? Well, I mean, that's up to each person. But for me personally, I don't think you should get into flying unless you absolutely love it. So, some people say, I want to save time and travel, it's more convenient, et cetera, et cetera. Really, I don't think you're going to want to invest the time and the money unless you really love what you're doing. So if you're getting into flying, make sure you really love it and pursue it. Also, I think it's important to find an instructor that you like and respect. So they got to, your personality should mesh, and also they should have the kind of experience you're looking for. If you want to be a commercial pilot and fly for a living, try to get an instructor that has experience doing that, and that's kind of their goal as well. If you want to fly for fun with your buddies on the weekends, get somebody that flies for fun all the time, because they'll be training you for the type of flying you want to be doing. And also, don't try to rush through your training. Enjoy your training. It's part of your flying journey. And a lot of people, I mean, myself included, you want to, get that license, get your hours in, get it done. But really, you find out after you get your license, you're like, why didn't I enjoy that more? That's half the fun is just learning. So really just enjoy the learning experience. And also, I thought this was pretty funny. My instructor told me, right about when I was ready to pass my, right before I went for my practical test, he told me, It's a common misconception that lift makes airplanes fly. Money is what makes airplanes fly, and I think that's what you'll find too. So make sure to, be setting some money aside, and just, make sure you have a plan set up where you have the money you need to get your training done. And I would try to avoid, taking out loans. It's better to plan ahead and just save money and just do it as, you get them, as the funds become available. And obviously, you got to sacrifice, A lot of times I haven't driven new cars because I'd rather be flying an airplane. So you got to, make those tough decisions. If you want to fly airplanes, it's going to cost you some money. But if you love it, it'll be worth it. And just to show you that, I've included some pictures at the end of just some flying I've done, and just some of the memories I've made along my flying journey. So.
Okay, kids ready?
Yep.
1, 2, 3.
You hear me when I call. You are my morning song. Though darkness fills the night, you cannot hide the light. Whom shall I fear? You crush the enemy underneath my feet. You are my sword and shield, though troubles linger still. Whom shall I fear? I know who goes before me, I know who stands behind. The God of angel armies is always by my side. The one who reigns forever, he is a friend of mine. The God of angel armies is always by my side. And my strength is in your name, for you alone can save. You will deliver me, yours is the victory. Whom shall